Hello and welcome to another motorcycling video. In this one there are 8 clips altogether in this trip, and so I'm going to release each one of them individually rather than a whole lot in one go, of course. And I'm out and about in Tasmania around North Esk, and how these videos work is that I film the video while I make the video while I'm riding, and if you look at the motorcycle, you can sometimes see in the shadow the camera that's on the left hand mirror of my motorcycle. So the video is recorded while I'm riding, and I don't have a sophisticated audio setup with an in-helmet microphone and separate recorder and all that sort of stuff, so I record the audio later. Generally what I do is talk about either things that I'm seeing on the road at the time or something else that interests me, which may or may not be motorcycle related, and I just cover topics that interest me. So I guess as a bit of a warning, if you're not interested in listening to me talk about things aimlessly for 14 to 15 minutes at a stretch, then just turn the volume down and enjoy the scenery. This is my chance to, as I say, express opinion about things, and I take that opportunity and talk about, as I said, things that are interesting to me. So by way of explanation, I'm in Tasmania at the moment, and I'm just heading down this road here is called Pitt Avenue from my house, and I'm going to be out just riding around with no particular place or destination in mind, just taking the road, taking a turn here, taking a turn there, seeing where it takes me, and hopefully I'll end up back at my house in an hour or so, or whenever time. The motorcycle I have here is a Suzuki Bergman AN Executive 650 scooter. There was a 650 scooter and the 650 Executive. I'm not sure exactly what the difference between the Executive and the ordinary and the standard model is. I know that mine has an electrically adjustable screen, which obviously then can be adjusted while you're riding, and I guess the advantage of that is that when you're riding in town and you're at low speed and you want a bit more airflow, you can drop the screen down, and when you're riding on the highway and going at 100, 110 and so on, the wind is pushing against you on your chest, you can put the screen up and break the wind up a little bit more. It also has electrically fold-in mirrors, and you don't fold those in while you're riding obviously, but when you're parking it's handy to be able to fold them in to avoid getting any damage to them from cars while you're parking and so on. So at the moment I've taken a turn up a road that's just down about a kilometre or so down from my house. This is called Pomona Road, and it's quite steep at the moment, and you can see it. I hope you can see that in the video here. And a little later on it becomes Eccleston Road. So for the people who are in Launceston or that area and know the area, you'll know where I'm riding. The others who are watching elsewhere, you will have to probably wait till the last video clip when I'll include a map at the end and you'll be able to see where I've gone. Now, a little while ago I got into a discussion with some other people on YouTube about the cost of motorcycling, and so I thought I'd talk about that today. One gentleman was referring to the cost of motorcycling and saying it was expensive, that keeping a motorcycle and owning a motorcycle was expensive, and he was talking about servicing and various government charges and so on. And another person came back to him and said, well, it's considerably cheaper to own a motorcycle than it is to own a car. So we went back and forth about. So here are some thoughts that I've had about the cost of motorcycling. First of all, we all understand when you buy any personal transportation, whether it's a car or a motorcycle, that there's the cost of the thing itself. There's the cost of the car, there's the cost of the motorcycle. With the car, you buy a car and you're done. You get in it, you drive away. When you buy a motorcycle, the first one you ever buy, you are up for about $1,500 to maybe $2,000 more in protective gear, helmet,
it's cold,
jacket, pants, boots, and maybe winter and summer gloves. Now there'll be some people who say, well, they don't buy all that stuff, or they don't need all that. They only got a little scooter and they don't need all those things. And we'll come to that talk about those costs relative to the cost of your machine in a moment, but quite simply, if you can't afford the gear, you probably can't afford the machine in the first place, and you probably shouldn't have the machine. And it doesn't matter when you hit the road, whether you fell off a step through 50 or a postie bike, or you fell off a Goldwing, which is an 1800 or 1.8 litre motorcycle. When you hit the road, and what's between you and the road, whether it's Kevlar or leather or something else, and what's between you and gravel rash is quite important. But okay, so when you buy your machine, you then have to buy a bunch of safety gear, and probably every 5 years or so you need to replace the helmet, just because it becomes a bit smelly with you wearing it all the time, and maybe the foam inside becomes a bit crumbly and wears out, and maybe your gloves wear out as well. And you certainly want winter gloves, especially in a place like Tasmania, and you probably want summer gloves as well, because the winter ones will be too hot during the summer months.
Good morning.
Then, as there is with your car, there's the servicing costs, there's the petrol costs, there's the replacement of various parts, tyres, windscreen wipers, globes, all that sort of stuff. And those things are expensive, and they're a cost whether you own a car or whether you own a bike. So I guess the cost is relative to the price of the original object. But in the case of motorcycles, tyres for motorcycles are in some cases considerably dearer than they are for for cars. Sorry. Now, for example, it can cost anywhere between $200 and $350 to replace a rear tyre on a motorcycle, depending on the motorcycle you have. Whereas you can probably get tyres for your car for about $180 a head. Front tyres are not quite as expensive because there's not as much wear on those. Most of the wear on your tyres and your motorcycle is on the rear tyre, because that's the driven wheel, of course. So those things can be expensive. Then there's a talk about the other things that you have to have. That is, keeping your bike on the road every year and whatever various charges that there are associated with that, and insurance costs and so on. And I'll come back to that in a moment, but I just wanted to at the moment take a diversion and talk about the road conditions here. In Tasmania they have that system of A, B and C class roads, which New South Wales adopted 5 or 6 years ago or whatever. This is probably a C class road, and what I can see, it's in pretty, what I recall of riding it that day, it's in pretty good condition. There are at this point markings down the middle. I always like those, because even on a back country road, you want to be able to tell motorists, well, there's your side of the road, there's my side of the road, and we'll try and stay on our side of the white line. There are those white markers on the side of the road in most cases, and the shoulders and the edges seem to be reasonably well made. They're not full of potholes and broken edges. The shoulder isn't terribly wide in some cases, so if you need to pull off the road, you need to be careful and look over your shoulder before you get off your bike. Right. If possible, get off it on the shoulder side of the road. But I think the road's in generally good condition, and it doesn't appear to be too many potholes and patches upon patches upon patches. And my memory of riding the day was it was a fairly comfortable ride. So the suspension was either soaking up the bumps pretty well, or the road was in generally good condition. I do like to see these white markings along the side of the road sometimes, especially at night time. It helps to show you where the edge of the road is as opposed to where the dirt or the shoulder is. They're not always present, but they are present in parts on this road. So getting back to talking about the cost of motorcycling. I have two motorcycles. I have a Kawasaki Vulcan Voyager 1700, which is a cruiser style motorcycle. I had that in New South Wales, and in Tasmania I have a Suzuki Bergen that I mentioned earlier. Now the cruiser motorcycle is a 1700. It's a big bike, and it was fairly expensive. I think when they were available in Australia, which they're not any longer, I think they were about $23,000. I didn't pay that much for mine. I bought it new, but I got a good trade-in on the bike I had previous to that. Big cruisers are not available anymore of that size for Kawasaki certainly, and Honda I don't think, and Yamaha either don't seem to have those really big cruisers any longer. And I suspect there were 2 or 3 reasons for that. One reason I think was the initial cost. Like I say,
see by the houses coming to the residential
Kawasaki was about 23 grand right away. So that's a fair chunk of money. You can buy a small car for the same price. As opposed to a Harley, though, it's $48,000 for this similar bike. And the one I have, the Kawasaki Voyager, is modelled on a Harley. I can't remember which one it is, but the similar Harley is around $45,000. The second factor is the cost of putting that bike on the road. So there's the registration, there's what's called compulsory third party or CTP insurance, which you have to get, then there's comprehensive insurance. And then on top of that, I think one of the factors that has discouraged people from buying the large cruisers have been these laws in various states and crackdowns by police in various states against outlaw motorcycle gangs. Now, this is not a place to have that discussion. I'm not here to do that. I'm just saying, I think perhaps some blokes in their 40s and 50s who are thinking of getting back into motorcycling or even starting motorcycling for the first time and think they'd like to get a big cruiser, were deterred by the fact that the police were pulling over anyone who was riding a cruiser, and a big one, and checking to see if they belonged to an outlaw gang and so on. Now, there's somewhat of an irony in that, because most of the guys who belong to those outlaw motorcycle gangs, or Hells Angels and the Gypsy Jokers and whatever they're called, they generally ride American bikes, Harleys, Indians and Victories. And some of them, they have almost a strict rule that says no Jap crap. But nevertheless, I think that discouraged quite a lot of people from getting the cruisers. And I think that the manufacturers, certainly those three manufacturers I talked about, thought we're not selling enough bikes in Australia to make it worth the effort to import these things. And the dealers were saying that we're not selling enough bikes here to make it worthwhile holding the stock we've got to hold and keeping the parts in stock that we've got to have or get. So they just stopped offering them. The scooters, as I said, scooters have kind of come in two different classes. There are the mini scooters, which are up to about 200 cc's in size, and then there's what are called the maxi scooters, which generally are about beyond that 250, 300, 400, 500, 650 that I've got. And I think Aprilia, which is an Italian manufacturer, one stage produced an 850 scooter. I know BMW had a 600 and a 650, and I think they even had a 400 at one stage. The Bergman 650 is no longer available in Australia. I think only the 200 and the 400 are available. And Yamaha, they have a T-Max, which is 550. I think it's Kimco or Kaimco that have about a 550 as well. But the other manufacturers, Honda, I'm not sure if they have a big maxi scooter any longer, and I think the Kawasaki only make a 350. And a couple of factors involved in that. I think first of all, the big scooters like the Suzuki Bergman, when they were new, the 650s, they were nearly $15,000, which is a lot of money for a scooter. As opposed to, let's say, a little postie bike or a step 350 or 125 or something, you can pick up for a couple of $1,000, $2,000 or $3,000, $4,000 maybe. And that's where this comment I made about the $2,000 in extra gear comes in. If you're spending $3,000 on a 125 or a 50 or 125 scooter, you're very reluctant to spend another $2,000 in safety gear, thinking I'm spending almost as much on the gear as I am on the bike. And I can know that I have seen people riding little scooters with shorts, t-shirts and thongs, a helmet because it's the law, and some gloves, and that's all. Now, I mean, that's their personal choice, but I think that the initial cost of buying the big scooters dissuaded people from buying them. But also the small scooters were cheap to run. They're very fuel efficient. They're cheap to run. I think they're postie bikes that they got a tank that takes about 5 litres of petrol or something, and they go for weeks on that. Their fuel consumption is extraordinary. So you could get good mileage out of them, but and you also the compulsory third-party insurance and all that sort of stuff was quite cheap. But with the bigger scooters like the 650s and so on, the compulsory third-party insurance is expensive, comprehensive insurance is expensive, registration is expensive, and scooters mainly appeal to people who just want to make a small commute in the city, or maybe do these food delivery things, or zip around the city. They're not really meant for the open road, and they're probably useless on the open road. But if you get a big scooter because you want it, like I'm doing at the moment here, taken to the open roads as well, you're paying a premium in sticker price, and then you're paying all these extra costs, higher costs in terms of insurance and registration and so on. And that discouraged people from buying them. And I think again the manufacturer said, well, we're not selling enough of these things here to warrant the effort of importing them, and we're not selling enough to keep the stock in parts and so on that we need to keep. So
greyhound racing on Monday
manufacturers
nights.
just discontinued them in the Australian market. And on top of that, and in some states, certainly in New South Wales, motorcycles pay tolls on the toll roads at the same price as a car. Think about that for a moment. This Suzuki Bergman I'm riding now weighs 220 kilograms fully laden. Another 80 kilos for me makes it a 300 kilogram machine on the road. It pays the same toll on all the toll roads in and around Sydney as does a fully laden, top of the line Toyota Land Cruiser Prado thing like that can weigh up to 3 tonnes. So you've got something that weighs 300 kilograms and you've got something that weighs 10 times that, and they're paying exactly the same toll. Now in Victoria, I think motorcycles are exempt from tolls. I'm not sure what the state plays in Queensland. To my knowledge, there are no toll roads in
North Esk
Tasmania or Western Australia, and I don't know what the state is in South Australia. Some people in New South Wales are paying from like $25 and $30 a day in tolls. So if you've got a small scooter and you've got to pay all these tolls, you're paying more in tollway fees than you are in petrol. So those are all sort of costs and things that you've got to factor in when you're thinking about getting a motorcycle. All right, well that's my talk about cost of motorcycling. We're about to come to the end of the first video. Thank you for watching. I hope you've enjoyed the countryside and this section of the ride around Launceston and suburbs, and I'll be speaking more about it in the next video. So thank you for watching, and I hope you catch the next one.
I don't know.